Hello, Coolman229 here with another Topic of the Week video, and this week I'll be discussing the Netflix Death Note movie. This week's topic was submitted by Tumblr anon, and their topic is how the Netflix adaptation of Death Note succeeded in being better than the original anime. It sounds like you enjoyed the movie. Unpopular opinion, yes, I did enjoy the movie. I actually thought it was pretty darn good, actually. Much better than the original anime. And yes, I know I'm going to get flack for saying this, but I hate Death Note. It's awful. I hated watching it. The only reason I even finished it is because I had a roommate who was showing it to me, and he's like, "Come on, you gotta watch it. You gotta watch all of it." And I was like after Ray Penber was killed, I'm like, no. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll watch a little bit. And after Naomi was killed, I'm like, no, I'm out. And he was practically grabbing me. He's like, no, you gotta finish it. And I did, and I hated it. I mean, okay, the arc where Light had had amnesia and he forgot who he was and he became a good guy. That was actually a pretty decent arc up until the ending, and then Light was just like, all according to Kakaiku, and then he ends up killing L, and it's just... Then the show got really, really bad. But, I'm pretty sure a lot of people agree that that last, arc was pretty bad, but I didn't enjoy Death Note. And when I first heard about this, and, we got our first glimpses of Light Turner. Yeah, the jokes and the memes just flowed unending, and you can't blame them. There's a history of adaptations being not so good, so a lot of people didn't expect much of this, and I didn't expect much of this. I wanted to watch it for kicks and giggles. The first scene I saw was when Light first meets Ryu, and yeah, that was pretty funny. It's funnier out of context, but that's why it was funny. But you just heard this guy with this screaming, But when I started watching it, I was starting to think, wow, that was actually a good choice, and wow, that's a pretty good change, and wow, I like this Light better than Light Yagami. And as I was watching the movie, and there were some changes that I wasn't a big fan of, but as I was watching it, I was like, huh, this is better than Death Note. And I mean that with 100% sincerity. Like, it is. A lot of people who are screaming that it's badly written, it's totally stupid, are people who are saying that because it's not literally the anime in a one-to-one adaptation. And they're also saying it because Light Turner is white, because it's being whitewashed. But I don't hear people complaining that L was made black. Yeah, that was the one that threw me off. I actually thought when he was first introduced that he was going to be Japanese, because he's introduced in Japan in this nightclub, or I think it's probably a strip club, but after murder, a murder scene, and then there's a Japanese detective next to him, played by that guy who played Hero and Heroes, but and when I first saw him, I'm like, oh, is L going to be Japanese? Like, that's interesting. And I start looking at his face, because he's got his face covered, he's got a hood, and he's mostly obscured, and he's in the dark. But then I first saw him, I'm like, wait, is he black? And you see his face, you're like, he is black. I'm like, that one definitely threw me off. But as weird as that was, the actor who played him and the writing of L's character was pretty darn spot on. He has all the mannerisms, that weird attitude, the love of sweets, that stupid thing where he would sit, but he's sort of crouching, and he's squatting. They got that down, and I was rather surprised that I really enjoyed his take on L. And I even enjoyed the change they made, and I will be saying that, I'm just going to say this right now, there will be spoilers for this movie. And I'm warning you because I actually really did enjoy this movie. but yeah, fair warning on the spoilers. That after what Tari died, and L lost it, and I liked seeing L have that raw emotion, and I felt and it was just weird that this is the movie, that this adaptation, this stupid American adaptation of Death Note, which is something I don't even generally like. I've been criticizing Death Note ever since I first saw it back in oh, was it 2010 or 2011? It was around that time. So yeah, I mean, about 6-7 years ago. You know, it's been a long time, but I've been criticizing it ever since because, oh my gosh, I hated it. It's so poorly written. It's so contrived. It's so overly complicated. Light is one of the most blatant Mary Sues I have ever seen in any piece of fiction. And he's so boring and bland and always wins, and the author was so busy shilling his character that, you know, he crapped on everyone else, made everyone act like an idiot, and it was just infuriating. I have a lot of negative feelings and lots of hatred for Death Note. And it's so stupid because it could have been done so well, but it was so poorly written. But back to the movie. One thing I like is that they fix a lot of the stuff, especially with the characters. While there are a few changes that I wasn't as big on, I really would have preferred L being Japanese because I kind of assumed he was going to be Japanese at first. But in L's dad, or not L's dad, Light's dad in this movie, who's still a cop, he's not nearly as much of a really nice guy. He's definitely very much, you know, man of the law, but he's definitely more American. But it's a minor thing really, because I still end up liking his character. But Light in this movie is so much better than Light Yagami. I can't even begin to state just how much of a better character he is. Like I said, Light Yagami, he's a total Gary Stu. Absolutely. He's one of the smartest students in Japan. He's super handsome. He's so suave and charming and popular that he could call up any girl and say, go on a date with me, and they'll drop what they're doing and go on a date with him. You know, he's just so brilliant. He can outsmart FBI agents, and he's also really great at sports too. And I'm just like, and he has no real defects. He has no real faults or flaws. And he was kind of designed almost as some sort of wish fulfillment for, I mean, I guess, you know, pretty sick people, because Light is a disturbingly psychotic character, and not even like an interesting to watch. He's boring because he's such a Gary Stu, but he's unbearable. Light Turner, on the other hand, is actually really likable and sympathetic, even when he's killing people. It is the way they wrote him and handle his character. We first see his character, like the very beginning of the movie, writing out what looks like filling out homework, and he's obviously, you know, trading it to people and getting money, so you see that he's cheating for people for money. So we already get this one, we figure out two things about his character from this. He's smart enough to casually do other people's homework, and two, he's willing to break rules for personal gain. That's very important to note about his character, because he's not just some goody-goody two-shoes. He's, you know, he's got his own problems. Another thing that we see right after this, you know, a little bit after this, is, you know, after the Death Note falls from the sky. And they know a lot of little details like that. And definitely, and I will say this overall, the movie has the spirit of Death Note. And I found out I heard even the creator of Death Note liked it, which, yeah, I mean, it actually takes Death Note and improves it. And, it carries the same spirit while being its own thing, and I mean, but anyway, I'll talk about that in a little bit. Let me get back to Light's character. One of the things about Light's character is that we see after that he confronts a bully, and this is a bully who he's quite literally mugging someone in the school, and no one's really stopping it. And we see Light and his overdeveloped sense of justice go up and try to stop him, and of course this guy's just like, "You're a wimp. What are you gonna do to me?" And Light starts pulling out this this brilliant, like, well, you see, I'm a minor, and you were held back, which means you're over 18. So if you hit me, I could sue you for child smack. And he hits Light anyway, and that was the moment I knew they were going to handle Light's character correctly. Because you see, one of the biggest problems with Light's character in Death Note and the anime and the manga is that he's too perfect. And it's not even, like, handled correctly. Like, it's not like the broken ace or the, you know, he's got actual big issues. He's just perfect. He's perfect in the narrative sense and as a person. Not as a person, because he's a psycho, but he's perfect. He doesn't have flaws in anything. And no one really hates him. I mean, except for the people who find out that he's Kira, but he's so popular and well-loved, it's boring. because I mean, if I was writing Death Note, I would definitely put Light at a disadvantage, and this movie does that. Oh my gosh, I can't even believe that they're actually doing stuff that I would have done. Because one of the things that this does for Light's character, and it does for, you know, our impression of him as the audience, is that it actually shows us that no, the Light is going to have to fight for what, you know, for what he wants to do. And also, we can very much better understand why Light would be willing to use the Death Note in order to kill people to enact his sense of justice. Because we see he's powerless, he's weak, he's a wimp. He wants to do good, but we know that he already has a skewed sense of morality. And we see that when he goes to the principal's office, because, you know, he was knocked out by the punch from the bully, and they found papers and like the other homework in his backpack. You know, and they're more mad at him than the bully that, you know, decked him so hard that he was rendered unconscious. And all this stuff feeds into Light's, you know, desire for revenge, for his own twisted morality, and so it makes more sense that his character would fall into this, you know, this power-mad god complex over the course of the series. And one thing that's really interesting is that they take the slow burn approach with Light. And thank goodness. One of my biggest complaints with Light's character in the anime was when I was watching him, he starts off and he's like, okay, I'm going to kill criminals, and then I'm going to, you know, I have these rules. I'm not going to kill innocent people. You know, if anything happens to my dad, you know, I'm done. You know, he has these like self-imposed rules. So okay, you know, and obviously you'd understand that as his character, he would end up struggling with the moral dilemma of what's going on. But the second Ray Penber comes in, he's like, all right, I'm just going to murder every FBI agent here. I'm like, whoa, 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 like, whoa. It's like he goes from 0 to 1,000 in like 5 minutes, and there's no development to it, and it really pissed me off because I wanted to see Light have that struggle that, okay, this is the most expedient thing is to kill everyone with the Death Note, but I have my own sense of morals that I want to use, that make me feel more righteous and important. So where's that conflict? It's in the movie, but it's not in the anime or the manga. And that's one thing I really like about this movie, is that we see Light actually struggle with the moral issues. And in fact, he doesn't actually do very many like really, really, truly horrible things. He kills criminals, yes, a lot of them. But the more messed up stuff is actually done by someone else. And Light is, up until the end of the movie, really kind of, his hands are fairly clean. Much more clean than the anime counterpart. Because he doesn't instantly want to kill anyone who gets in his way. Because, you know, he has Mia, and Mia is this movie's version of Misa. And oh my gosh, I don't care what anyone says about this movie, they cannot argue that Mia is a million times better character than Misa ever was. And I'll talk more about her, because Mia is the one who actually ends up being a key component in corrupting Light. And I'll talk about her character in a minute, but Light has these struggles, and because it's funny because, alright, I have to talk about Mia, because her story and Light's story are intertwined in this movie. Mia is a girl at school, and automatically we have something that really works for Death Note. We have Light and basically Misa meeting in school and basically starting the whole Kira thing together. You know, Light does come up with the name Kira, which, you know, does mean light in some languages, but he specifically picks it because it's named, killer in Japanese. So and it's funny is that he actually has multiple people in different continents, like, he kills them and has them, like, write Japanese and makes a big show of Kira, making people think that Kira is Japanese, which, you know, for all the people complaining about the race, you know, thing, they made that a plot point. And I kind of like that. And in fact, it's actually specified by L in the movie that, you know, all these clues that this Japanese stuff was making people think that he was Japanese. And then, you know, L's the one who figures out that no, he's really not. You know, he's American, and he pinpoints him down to Seattle. So, but anyway, See, Mia obviously starts off because you don't really think much about her character. I mean, she's got dark hair compared to Misa's like blonde, and when she first after because there's so much going on in this movie. I have to talk about Ryuk's introduction because there's so much. Oh my gosh, there's so much I have to talk about this movie. When Light gets the Death Note and we first see Ryuk, for that scene where people complained about Light screaming, it was probably one of my favorite scenes. And not because it was funny, but because it was a really believable character moment. Okay, Light sees him for the first time after he starts terrorizing, Light in this classroom by, breaking a jar of marbles, and he comes in and he sees them, and Light freaks out and screams, and people were complaining that he was like a pussy or something for this, and I'm like, how would you react if if an actual 8 foot tall, in the words of Light Yagami, demon looking mother effer showed up in your classroom and was terrorizing you? You'd be screaming like a little girl too. And, it's a believable moment, but, people are complaining that Light isn't, just all according to Kikaiku. I was expecting you, Ryuk. In fact, I actually knew about Shinigami all along. I've known since I was 4 years old. It's just... so infuriating in the anime. But one of the things that really makes Light, believable is that when he first sees Ryuk, he's terrified. Yeah, I'd be terrified if I saw Ryuk too. And I actually have to point this out too. Ryuk is played by Willem Dafoe, and he is flawless in this movie. Willem Dafoe, he does motion capture for Ryuk, and...
Oh, yes. A dream. I like that. Dreams are places you can have fun, right? It's all in your mind, so why not enjoy it? Shh. Listen. Go check it out.
His voice, his mannerisms, his acting, oh my gosh, he is perfect. I love Ryuk in this. Ryuk is great. And one thing that they really do is that Ryuk is, for the most part, concealed in shadows, or he's not in very bright areas, and it gives this air of mystery because you don't actually see him in full detail. And it's creepy and unsettling, and it's very, very good for setting up his character and the way you're supposed to perceive him, because a lot of people think Ryuk is just funny, and there's a lot of goofy stuff that he does that I think really doesn't fit, and he's much more terrifying in this. And I think that really works for what his character is, especially when he's constantly trying to get Light to use his Death Note, or give it up to him, and he'll give it to someone else who will go around killing people. And unlike really with the anime, Ryuk is almost totally antagonistic to Light, because Light does have a sense of morality and Ryuk doesn't particularly care for that. And he, at times, there's sometimes he's literally just give me the Death Note, I'll go find someone else. And then Light's just like, no. Because you see Light, despite the fact that there are numerous times when he says he wants to get rid of the Death Note, but then when push comes to shove, he wants it, he keeps it. He even goes out, there's this one, they reenact the scene basically where L reveals himself to Light, and he's just like, by the way, I'm L. And they sort of reenact that scene in a cafe, and L was smart and had his face covered. He did uncover his face though, but Light basically is, he doesn't directly admit to being Kira, but he does drop hints that, what if Kira wanted to stop doing this? And L basically was like, I wouldn't go easy on him, and then Light ended up getting aggressive and defensive over it because he likes the power of the Death Note. And we see this carry out throughout, and going back to Mia, and Mia is funny because when she's first, when Light first uses the Death Note after Ryuk terrorizes him in the classroom, and then once Light kind of adjusts to the fact that there's an 8 foot tall demon looking mother effer in the classroom with him, he sees the bully outside, and he writes in, how to, his name, Kenny, whatever, I don't remember, and he's like, you can write how he dies. So then Light, and it's these little details that of course, Light would, decide of how he kills someone. He decides to kill him via decapitation. And some sort of like Final Destination style crap comes in where there's a crash and then this ladder ends up like sliding out and like slicing his head in half, and it's just like, ooh. So like I know when I saw the gore, I'm like, oh, and there's not like a whole ton of gore in this. There's just bits of it, and it's like, because I saw it, like, oh, that's in the movie. But and of course, Light, despite Light being shocked about this, which that makes sense. He does end up adjusting to this fairly quickly and does end up getting excited and start reading the rules of the Death Note. There's a funny moment I have to say where he's looking through the Death Note and he's seeing the rules, and one of the things he sees this warning. It's basically like, don't trust Ryuk, he's not your friend. And it kind of reminded me of like Gravity Falls, of the warnings in the journal about Bill Cipher, but it's funny because Light pronounces his name as Ryuk. Oh, don't trust Ryuk. And then Ryuk comes out and he's like, it's pronounced Ryuk. Oh, and it's funny because when I see people comparing this to the last, Night Shyamalan's The Last Airbender, and I'm like, no, at least they're pronouncing the names right. At least they're not, at least they don't call him Ryuk. Ryuk, why are you doing this? Ryuk. Avatar Ung. But, yeah, so Mia ends up seeing him with the Death Note in school, and people complain about this. Like, why doesn't he have that super special safe that Light had? He's a teenager. He may be smart, but he's not a Gary Stu. Who's really gonna pay attention to this kid with a book that says Death Note on it? Like, they'll think he's just being some edgy teen. Well, like, seriously, is that really so weird? It's not like people would actually believe if he's like, yeah, by the way, if I write someone's name in this, they died. And they'll be like, you keep carrying on, edgelord. But and then she sees it and he ends up telling her about it, and she joins in on him because she's really into it. And that was when she was basically talking about how she didn't feel sorry that Kimmy got decapitated at all. That was the moment when I saw her. I'm like, wait a minute, is she Misa? Is she this version of Misa? And she is. I actually looked it up, and officially she is based off of Misa. But oh my gosh, she's so much better character. She's actually the one who pushes for Light to do some of the more gruesome, horrifying stuff. She's totally cool with just killing anyone who gets in their way because she believes in them being like gods and delivering justice, and anyone who gets in their way is deserves death. And people are like, she's more like canon Light than Light Turner is, and like that's kind of the point. She gets some of the worst stuff. When it comes to killing the FBI agents, they still die. But you find out eventually that Mia's the one who did it. I mean, it's kind of obvious when you're watching the movie, but because Light thinks that Ryuk did it, but Ryuk pretends that he did because Ryuk was trolling him, because of course he is. Then you find out that Mia did it because she didn't want them to get in their way. And there's a character named Raymond, and I think he's supposed to be some sort of counterpart to Ray Penber, but he's not called Ray Penber, despite the fact that Ray Penber is an English name. But whatever. He doesn't have a character. And oh yeah, I should say they totally skip out on Naomi, which, as much as I love Naomi's character, she was treated like garbage in the canon, and I'm totally cool with her and Ray Penber just not being in the movie. They have an FBI agent that fulfills the same role, except it's done in a better way that's not as stupid. Like when Mia finally, she ends up tracking them down. She knocks out one of the agents, and there's this Raymond guy, Raymond something, I don't remember his last name, but she writes his name in the death, and she checks his ID. She writes his name in the death note to have him write down the other people in the investigation because he knows what they look like. So then it had them all, basically commit suicide, or some of them just died, and others committed suicide. And yeah, that was far more believable than what happened. And on top of that, Light remains innocent of some of the more really horrifying stuff because Light actually has morals. Mia shows him this site that people had created where people would post faces and names and descriptions of people that they felt deserved to die by Kira's hand. And, they're like, oh look, we have pedophiles and rapists and murderers and all this horrible stuff. And then Light rightfully points out, well, we can't trust this. I'm not going to kill people just because someone said, something bad about them on here. And she's just like, I don't know what the problem is. And he's like, or what if one guy his girlfriend ends up getting banged by another guy and he wants to kill that other guy and he puts his face up here and says, oh, well, this guy beats his wife or something like that. He's like, well, says, that's, I can't kill someone just because someone is being petty like that. And then Mia, of course, redirects the question to basically, like, trying to, like, oh, would you kill someone if they effed me here? And it's like she's dodging the question because she knows Light is right. And what's really interesting is that near the end of the movie, when Mia flips the script on him, and she feels like he's not really like living up to what Kira should be, so she wants to take it. So she writes his name in the Death Note. She says that according to the rules, if you burn that page, then the effects of the Death Note for that person disappear. But you can only do it once. You can only do it with one person. So she said, I'll burn the name as long as you give me. I'll burn your name in the book as long as you give me the Death Note. And I'm gonna say this is like the biggest cool thing in the anime, or not the anime, but the movie. When we get to the end, is Light's big gambit, because he wants to keep the Death Note, despite the fact that he kept saying over and over that he wanted to. He either didn't want to get rid of the Death Note, or he wanted to get rid of it, or he wanted to turn himself in. He ultimately keeps it, and at the end, there's this big climax where, he's trying to rush to get the Death Note and give it to Mia so that she doesn't kill him. Because she loves him so much, and it's this twisted, disturbing love they have for each other. Because they do start a relationship, and a pretty steamy one, too, based on the fact that, they're killing people. And I'm like, this is a much more engaging relationship than Light and Misa. Congratulations, Netflix Death Note. You made a more believable romance out of Light and Misa. And you also made it a believably tragic and, disturbing and frankly selfish and just conceited feelings for both of them that brought out the worst in each other. That fuels into Light's ultimate turn to villainy. And this slow burn effect on Light's character is perfect, and it's what he needed. Not just, I have rules, and I'm morally gray, too. I am literally pure evil. According to Kakaiko. But we see at the end, we see him pull up that site for a little bit, and he's scribbling something in the Death Note. And, okay, so he's doing something with that. At the end, he ends up going on this big Ferris wheel with Mia, and he ends up giving her the Death Note, and she basically talks her out of taking the Death Note because, this is too great for anyone. It's too much power for any one man to have. All that BS. And then he finds out that he had written her name in the Death Note, as for as insurance. And then there's a big squabble, and she ends up taking the Death Note. But then the Ferris wheel starts collapsing. And ultimately, Mia falls off trying to grab the Death Note, and then Light falls off too, and then he ends up in the hospital. And then he reveals, and as they're falling, they play this like cheesy, overly romantic tone to make it super tragic, and I thought that was a little much until you get to the big reveal. Light was faking that whole last part of the movie. He wrote Mia's name in the Death Note, but he didn't just write her name down. He orchestrated her death to look like a tragic death. He also made sure that he landed in the water because, soft water and everything. It really wouldn't have it really wouldn't have been that cushy of a fall, but whatever, movie physics. But he orchestrated the way she acted, the way she ultimately took the Death Note. He manipulated her. And even as they're falling, he has full knowledge of what's going on. And as the page that she wrote his name on, he wrote it so that she grabbed it, and then it fell into the fire and burned, sparing him. But he also took people from that website, which shows that, yes, at this point, he's not only willing to kill Mia to keep the Death Note, but he's also willing to use people who may or may not be bad. There's no real question, and yeah, from what we've seen, it heavily implies from what we saw at the end of the movie that those guys actually were bad. So he uses the Death Note to, he has like one guy fish the Death Note out of the water. He has one guy fish him out of the water and bring him to the hospital. This, screwy doctor to put him in a medically induced coma for 2 days. He has a guy who took the Death Note. He has him write names in the Death Note during the time when he's comatose to further throw suspicion away from him, which does end up actually having the authorities distrust L. So Light ends up getting more or less, off scotch-free in terms of the authorities, while L is like, I know he's Kira. Says, and they're like, well, people are dying while Light Turner's in a coma. You're wrong, and you're dumb, and you're also stupid. But then we saw that he had that guy bring in the Death Note, and basically all the people who helped him, that they died, and he's like, this is ultimately Light becoming Kira. And that development, that slow burn development over an hour and a half movie, is so important to making Light's turn to villainy believable. Because it's not believable in the anime where he goes from, hi, I'm Light Yagami, I'm a top student in Japan high school, to, I'm a mass murdering serial killer who will destroy anyone who gets in my way, all according to Kakaiko. And that's one of the reasons why this movie is so much better. Even that cheesy love song was just a diversion to throw you off, thinking that it was just tragic that she died and he didn't want her to. But nope, he wanted her to die. He orchestrated her death, and funnily enough, we find out that his dad finds out that he's Kira at the end. But now we have a moral quandary with him. Like, does he keep to his promise of putting Kira behind bars and bringing him to justice, or is he going to protect his son? And that's an interesting dilemma. And at the very end, we actually have L with a page of the Death Note, the one that Mia had taken, and he remembers all these clues, and he finds out, and he has a pen, and he has, the page of the Death Note, and he, like, since he's figured out, how it works, and he's about to put it, and he starts just like, what am I doing? And then he starts kind of laughing, and then it cuts, and you don't know what he does. I'm like, that's an interesting cliffhanger. Now, speaking of messed up stuff with, what Light does, Light uses the Death Note on Watari, who is Japanese in this, because he's, of course, why not just make him Japanese? I don't care about the race bending as long as the writing is actually good, and the writing is good in this. It's much better than the actual anime and manga, and much more enjoyable. But Light uses the Death Note on Watari, and he plans on burning the page, before the 2-day mark, because he was going to use him to control him to go find L's name so he can get L out of the way. He'll spare Watari by burning the page, and this is why Mia ended up writing his name in the Death Note, because she wanted to stop him from doing that. Excuse me, because he can only do it with one person, and if he did it on Watari, she couldn't spare him afterwards. And of course, it's this self-righteous attitude of everything's all about them. But we see that he uses this on Watari, and Watari basically barely gets to that orphanage. Was it the Whammy orphan? I don't remember what it was, but and there was a little thing. I don't know if this was actually a reference to Nier, but we see like a container of jelly beans next to a doll, and I know Nier had a whole thing with toys. I know he had these little dolls, so I don't know if that was just a cute little reference to Nier, or if I'm just reading too much into that. But I remember that when Watari's in the the whole dilapidated orphanage, and we see that Mia had basically written these guys to go in and kill Watari so that Light couldn't save him, so that she could do it. And so Mia's behind a lot of the most messed up stuff in this that ends up that Light wouldn't do, which, oh my gosh, this makes Light more likable, because Light has morals. it's screwed up morals, and he still believes that mass murder is okay as long as it's the right kind of person. But he's basically barely walking on the slippery slope, and he ends up falling down it. But Light does have morals that he doesn't break for a good chunk of the movie, and Mia takes those, who basically is Misa, takes the place of doing the horrible stuff like killing FBI agents, killing Watari, and it ends up driving Light to becoming a worse person. And we see that, and that's like, oh my gosh, what? Like, they fixed one of the biggest problems with Death Note. So many problems with Death Note. One of the things that I also liked is that we saw that Light and his dad in this movie. He doesn't have a sister in this version because they actually cut a lot of characters who didn't really do anything. I mean, a lot of the police characters are just... the only one that's really relevant is Light's dad. And then we have, Naomi and Ray Penber are basically cut out. There's only a character who's he basically serves the same function as Ray Penber, but without getting us attached to his character or showing us anything about him. And one thing I really do like is that we see that Light does care about his dad. It starts off at the beginning because you find out, his mother died, in this incident, and he thought his dad didn't care, and you see his dad is sort of a stern, kind of almost emotionally cold, but you find out that, he does hate that guy who killed, his wife and Light's mother, too. It's just that, he doesn't let himself be consumed by it. And we see that Light does care about his father more than Canon Light ever did. Like, there's this one moment in the movie where Light hugs his dad, and I was sitting there, I'm like, Light actually genuinely caring about his dad? And when Light's dad ended up going up and onto the podium and do this press conference and straight up saying he will catch Kira and he will not stop until Kira is caught, and then Ryuk and Mia are basically like, you gotta kill him. And he's like, no, it's my dad. And ultimately Elf uses this to figure out that this is how he pinpoints that Light is Kira, because you're willing to kill so many people but not your dad. And he's like, and I'm like, it's a pretty good deduction. And yeah, Light doesn't cross those lines in this, and I'm sure, and and after the development he got in this of becoming a villain, I wouldn't be upset if he actually did eventually kill his dad, because we've already seen this development of him becoming a worse person, because we don't really get that in Death Note. He's basically just already like that, and he says he cares about his dad, but he really doesn't. So the words were empty, but we can feel genuinely that he genuinely meant that in the movie. And if I want, like, I'm interested to see him become more like evil. If there's ever, I don't know if there's ever going to be a sequel, but in a potential sequel, I would like to see him be more evil, because they've gotten that development out of the way, and Light could be closer to his canon incarnation, and which makes sense because he's already had the development to get to that point, a full movie of it. And that's really one of the key things that makes this great, is with Light, and I've already talked about a lot of the stuff. Mia is an interesting character, and even though she ends up dying, she contributes more to the story than Misa ever did. Misa did stuff. I mean, the whole other Shinigami, I think there's a second Death Note, if I remember correctly. All that stuff is cut out. It streamlines so much of Death Note into a much better and more concise story, and it doesn't drag out a lot. It takes out stupid subplots. Characters that are there just to get killed off aren't in it, and yeah, that's great. Now, one thing I talked about, I mentioned Watari dies, and we see that L ends up losing it, and he ends up grabbing what looks like one of Watari's guns, and he basically goes out to hunt Light down. And there's this big, cool chase scene, and it was funny is that L tries to get, he catches Light, and he basically puts a gun on him, and he gets this guy, and he's like, I need you to go get someone, and then this guy hits L because he's just like, Lord Kira, I'm like, oh, one of the Kira worshippers, like, oh my gosh. And they actually made that relevant and, you know, useful to the story, and this is the reason that light ends up escaping, and wow, like, I ended up liking this movie so much more than I thought I would, and for all the crap that people are giving it, it's so much better than people want to give it credit for. Because a lot of people can't admit that Death Note is poorly written, and it's bad, it's crap. It was one of the most painful experiences with any kind of media I've ever had, and this, I actually thoroughly enjoyed the Netflix movie. I do have a few issues, but minor compared to my issues with the actual Death Note canon. Now, let's see, is there anything else really to talk about with that, with the movie? You know, I think that's really about it. Specifically, there's one thing I need to talk about with Light's character. Light feels more human. Light's a more believable and likable character, and so much of this movie focuses on him. And it feels so much better with a character that's relatable and likable than a character who is inhuman. Because let's be real here. Light Yagami is an inhuman character. You can't relate to him. You can't sympathize with him. You know, there's no rules. There's no care. There's no real love. You can't believe anything about him at all. But I can believe Light Turner. Light Turner is a better character than Light Yagami, and I say that wholeheartedly because he's a believable character. He's more human. He gets scared. He falls in love. He cares about his family. He acts selfish but believable ways, and you know, it saddens me that so many people are like, oh my gosh, Light is White, the worst movie ever, and just immediately jumping the gun to hate it, when if you really, you know, watch the movie, it's great, and it's so much better than the original Death Note. I really liked it, and I really think that a lot of people need to chill out on giving it so much hate. You know, it's a movie, it makes Light's character likable, it fixes Misa's character to be an actual good character that serves the plot. It cuts out a lot of the extraneous plot lines and characters and just gets to the meat of it, and really, a lot of people thought that this movie felt too fast, but no, it's just because it's not, it's just because you don't have, you don't have Naomi coming in for a couple episodes, you know, and then getting killed off for no reason other than the fact that she was too smart, that she would have figured out, you know, who Kira was, and so the author killed her off because you can't have Light face a challenge, right? Like, just kill anyone who gets in his way. Use the power of the author to just kill people, because that's bad writing. That's really bad writing. But we don't see that in the movie, and I really don't know what else to say about it. It's so much better. It's better writing. You know, the direction is better. You know, it keeps a lot of the spirit and the ideas of Death Note, you know, together, and it's in this movie. It invokes the same kind of feelings that you get from like the better parts of Death Note, but without all the horrible stuff. And in a few bits that I didn't care for, like, I would have liked Light's dad to be a little bit on the nicer side, and I would have preferred if L was Japanese instead of black, but minor difference, like minor issues, when the whole thing is actually a pretty solid product, and it's a pretty solid story. And, you know, if you're wondering, you know, what it's, you know, for all the hate it's getting, I really think it's undeserved. And I know people are probably going to give me flack for that, but you know what? I call it how I see it. And this movie is actually pretty good. Well, that's about it for this topic. If you want to submit a topic, just comment below on YouTube, or if you're on Tumblr, send me an ask and do topic : then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Just make sure you're following the rules that I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. And thank you for watching.